Welcome to What She Said, the heartbeat of Canadian women's voices, with me, your host, Candace Sampson. Here, we dive deep into the raw, unfiltered stories and triumphs of women from coast to coast. This isn't just a podcast, it's a movement where empowerment and education collide and where mansplaining is shown the door. We're here to celebrate, uplift, and echo you. So get cozy, tune in, and let's embark on this journey together, exploring the rich tapestry of women's lives, their battles and victories, right here on What She Said. Much of eastern Canada will be experiencing a heat wave this week, trapped under a dome, as they call it. Temperatures are expected to soar to 40 degrees or more with the humidex, posing serious health risks. So it's really crucial to stay proactive, keep your pets indoors, ensure everyone in your family stays hydrated, close your windows and curtains to aid your air conditioning units, and if possible, stay cool indoors. And what better way to do that than tuning into this week's episode of What She Said? As we navigate this blistering heat together, let's dive into some engaging discussions that are sure to keep your mind stimulated while you stay cool. Here's what's coming up. Today, I'm joined by Dianne Martin, CEO of the Registered Practical Nurses Association of Ontario, WeRPN. We're going to be diving into their latest annual report, The State of Nursing in Ontario, a 2024 review, which paints a stark picture of the challenges faced by nurses across the province. With its urgent calls for action, the report is a critical piece in understanding what needs to be done to support our nurses and enhance patient care. And Brodie is back with a stellar lineup for this week's Saturday Night at the Movies. We're discussing Lena Dunham's 1980s reflection on father-daughter dynamics in Treasure, preparing for major tears with Julia Louis-Dreyfus in Tuesday, and exploring the impactful sports doc Power of the Dream on Prime Video, which follows WNBA players and their social justice movements. I'm also thrilled to welcome Andrea Warner, a celebrated music journalist and author of The Time of My Life, Dirty Dancing. Andrea's book dives into why Dirty Dancing remains an iconic film, resonating through its themes of feminism, activism, and reproductive rights. As a personal favorite of mine, I am so happy to be having this discussion with her. I hope you will enjoy it too. We'll also examine the controversies surrounding Bill C-53 with Dr. Pam Palmater, a Mi'kmaq citizen and expert in Indigenous governance. Pam will shed light on why this legislation could be seen as problematic, especially concerning First Nations treaty rights and land use. Finally, Jo DeLuzio joins me to talk about her powerful memoir, Surviving the Closet. Jo's story is an inspiring account of coming out later in life after 2 decades of marriage, highlighting the unique challenges and poignant realities faced by many in the LGBTQ2S+ community. So stay tuned as we navigate these important discussions, all happening right now. In today's first interview, I'm joined by Dianne Martin, CEO of the Registered Practical Nurses Association of Ontario, WeRPN. WeRPN has released their annual report, The State of Nursing in Ontario, a 2024 review, which highlights the ongoing challenges and pressures faced by registered practical nurses across the province. With alarming statistics and urgent calls for action, this report sheds light on the critical state of healthcare in Ontario. Dianne is here to discuss the findings and what needs to be done to support RPNs and improve patient care. Welcome back, Dianne.
Thank you for having me.
We did this last year. I'm a little afraid to ask. Is it worse, better, holding its own? Where are things right now?
So what we do every year is sort of measure the experience of nurses. What are they seeing? What are they feeling? What we're finding this year is there's a few areas that are somewhat worse, but in many other areas we're seeing sort of a leveling off. Now, when I say leveling off, not leveling off at a good level, but it's encouraging to see that it's not getting worse. But the downside of that is the current state that it's in is creating a situation where nurses go to work every day, and while they're working in the role of nursing, they're planning what they're going to do with their lives next. This has been so sustained for so long, these difficulties.
Yeah, the bar is very, very low, I can imagine right now. So nearly half of RPNs are considering leaving the profession. That's heartbreaking, especially considering what the shortage we're dealing with. So, what are the main factors driving this sentiment, and how is it impacting the healthcare system?
First of all, if I could, it is nearly half that are leaving, but one of the problems that we're having is the numbers are unclear when they are shared by the government. So, for example, the government has said that last year, at any point in time, 17,700 new nurses added to the system, which is correct, but that is not a net number. That's the number of new nurses that came in. And from that number, you have to subtract the number of nurses that left. And so it's incredibly misleading. The number of practical nurses that were added is somewhere in the vicinity of 7,000 to new graduates or people coming from other countries. But the number that left was more than that. So we, for practical nurses, are at a net minus 400 nurses. So at a time when
Oh,
yes, it's incredibly misleading. RNs, somewhat better, but still, after adding about 10,000 new RNs, only just under 6,000 additional. So for practical nurses, very heavily involved in caring for the aging population, when we should be adding tens of thousands, we are 414 less than we were this time last year. So that's the first important point about how many do we have. The reason they tell us they're leaving in this survey is they told us that the pay isn't reflective of the role they carry out. I'm talking about practical nurses here. They carry out a role that is closer to an RN than a PSW, but their pay is still very close to a PSW. That's the first thing that's most important to them. And the second most important reason is the workload, as you know from last year, became so much greater, but now it's become somewhat normalized. It's quite normal to go in and work shorthanded every day. And every day is a little too often to go home feeling like you failed at the very job you want to do well at.
well, actually, that leads me right into my next question because mental health remains a serious concern for RPNs, with 72% reporting a decline in self care and overall mental health. So, what support systems are currently in place, and what more can be done?
So the support systems, there are some nurses who are under have in their contracts negotiated for coverage for their mental health therapy, but not every nurse has that. And once again, the reason nurses are struggling with their mental health is twofold. First of all, as I previously mentioned, the moral distress of having to go into work every day and decide um, which portions of the care you want to provide are the most important to provide. And you go home feeling somewhat like you have experience, just haven't done the job you're educated to do. And the other piece is with being so short staffed, nurses aren't able to access a predictable paid time off, use their vacation time, that sort of thing. So what we need in every profession is the downtime to regroup and also the time at work to love your job. And those are the two reasons we're experiencing some mental health issues.
Obviously, the reliance on agency nurses has increased as well, which can cost the province significantly more. I mean, we've seen that in every report. So, how is this affecting workplace dynamics and the overall budget for healthcare?
Well, in terms of the budget, not just Ontario, I saw last week that the New Brunswick Auditor General had slammed the government for the cost of what they call travel nurses.
Mm.
Ontario, we know that there is a tremendous amount of money that should be used to pay for many nurses, being used to pay for a smaller number of nurses because hiring them through an agency is what sort of desperate organizations are forced to do. Within the working environment, it's a very difficult situation for the nurses because first of all, they have gratitude for nurses arriving to just give them any sort of help. But when you are overworked and you are sent a nurse who, through no fault of their own, aren't familiar with the unit, aren't familiar with the routines, the policies, the type of patients. It's an added burden to the nurses who are already working in that environment. But the nurses that aren't familiar with the environment and needed to be assisted throughout their day, those nurses can be making as much as 2 to 3 times what the nurse assisting them is making. And after a while, um, I think everyone can imagine the toll that takes on people who've chosen to work directly for an employer.
Yeah. The report, Dianne, also suggests that introducing legislated nurse-to-patient ratios and harmonized nursing wages can help. So can you explain how these measures would help address the staffing crisis?
Sure. So there's also another recommendation in there that leadership needs to not allow um, nursing shortages to short-staffed for a shift to be normalized. And that's what nurse-to-patient ratios really works to achieve. It works to create a disincentive for organizations to just let hope for the best, hope that these nurses cope for the day. And of course, when you don't have nurses, you don't have to pay them. And I don't think that's the motivation of our organizations. But I think it's worth noting that we always need to create a disincentive for not having those nurses there. So that's the first thing. The harmonization of wages is a very interesting issue for RPNs, especially because there are two issues here. There's the pay not necessarily reflecting the job that they do in the practical nurse's case. And the second is that a nurse, some people think that you need more skills to work in a hospital. The opposite is actually true. When you're walking into someone's home to take care of someone who can be at home but has complex wounds or whatever, that amount of knowledge is tremendous that's needed to do all the different things you're going to encounter. In long-term care, to give people quality of life, regardless of their dementia or all those other elements, that takes a tremendous amount of knowledge. And yet we don't have sort of an equalization of pay across those sectors. So it is much more appealing to work in a hospital that has a great pension plan, that has great benefits, and that has, in the cases of RPN, slightly more pay. But to me, anytime we have that situation, that would suggest that hospital patients are more important than our long-term care people, or more important than those that are trying to heal in their homes. And in order to draw all of the right people to all sectors, we have to harmonize those wages across sectors.
So aside from the nurse to patient ratios and harmonized nursing wages, as you just touched on, are there any other changes that need to happen more quickly to make a significant impact on the current state of nursing in Ontario?
Yeah, I think that the government should, first and foremost, should dedicate themselves to eliminating the agency nursing. So it can't happen overnight, but the work towards that, finding the solutions that would eliminate those, even controlling how much you are able to pay a nurse to work in an agency, to go into an organization, all of those things could help. The other thing is we talk a lot about, and this is one area where there's some good things happening. We talk about how if you give nurses a bright future, if you give them, and PSWs, if you give them programs that are going to pay for their education, they're going to stay in the profession. And so right now, it can look really appealing to become a real estate agent, or if you want further education, maybe an accountant, or any of those sorts of things. But if we are paying for their education, staying within the profession is much more likely. And we currently do have some time-limited funding to do that. But what we need to see is for that to continue until we reach the levels we need to reach.
So you're going to be back next year. I know you will, with the 2025 report. And I hope that it comes back rosier than this year or last year. But in the meantime, what can the public do to support RPNs and advocate for better conditions in our healthcare system?
I think, first of all, most patients see what's going on. Although I recently was in Emerge and saw the triage nurse taking so much abuse from people. So first of all, be kind to the nurses when you're a patient. They are absolutely doing the best they can with very little. But I think the
100%.
public can also, you know, um, you can also communicate to people what you're seeing, what you're hearing. Most importantly, though, when it comes election time, here's what I do. I print out everybody's election platforms. Then I go through it with yellow highlighter, the things I want to talk about. And then when someone arrives at my door or I encounter someone out there, I pull out their particular platform with my yellow highlighted bits. Now, they don't love this when I do this, but I pull out their platform with the yellow highlighted bits and say, here's what's important to me as a person, and make yourself really informed in that. Make sure you know exactly what the policies are of the people you're voting for in the next election. I think that's incredibly important.
I couldn't agree with you more. I'm not going to mention who I'm not voting for, not to make this interview political. But thank you, Dianne, for joining me. I want people to be able to find this report. It is incredibly impactful. And obviously, keep up with WeRPN through the whole year. So where can they do that?
They can go to our website, www. I guess my daughter said we don't use the W's anymore. So WeRPN. You're so old, Mom. WeRPN.com. And if you go there, you will find our report. And please read the entire report. There's quotes from nurses about their experiences. Whether you're a nurse or not, you're going to find it very compelling.
All right. Fantastic. Dianne, thank you so much for joining me. And I hope we see you in brighter, happier conditions next year for 2025's report.
Absolutely. I hope so too. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Steve Yerko.
And I'm Tara Sands. Now available from Maji Media is our new podcast, 4Kids Flashback. 4Kids is the company who brought you the English dub of Pokemon in the late 90s and so many other shows like Yu-Gi-Oh!, Shaman King, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Kirby, the infamous One Piece dub, and so many more.
We'll be talking to the people who worked at 4Kids. Actors, directors, writers, editors, producers, engineers, you get the point. And hopefully get the answers to questions both you and I have about the company.
I actually worked there as a voice actor on some of the shows.
And I was a kid watching the shows and remember way more than Tara does.
And thank God for that. Steve is actually a professional storyboard artist, which gives some really unique insights into anime and animation. Subscribe today wherever you get your podcasts. That's the number 4Kids Flashback.
It's time for Saturday Night at the Movies with Anne Brodie. And last week was a little bit weird. What's on the agenda this week?
I know. It's a fantastic week, Candace.
Oh, great. Awesome. Tell me about Treasure.
Oh, so moving. Oh, my goodness. Well, Lena Dunham, who we know as a comedian, goes in the opposite route, along with Stephen Fry, a British comedian. So they're putting their feet in something really profound. Okay, so it's in the 80s, and Lena plays a woman who is, she's a journalist in New York, but she joins her father, who's a Holocaust survivor, in Warsaw to go and see where he grew up and what happened. And I don't think they're prepared for his response because of the memories that it stirs up for him. However, it begins to happen. It sparks memories, but somehow, and I don't know if it's true for survivors, but he seems to rise above it and be upbeat and funny. And she's becoming really concerned. They visit his old apartment where 40 years earlier, his family had been kicked out and taken to the camps. The family that moved in is still there, and they have some of the things that his family owned. So without telling him, she buys these things from him, a tea set, a winter coat, etc. Anyway, he's upbeat. He's fine. They go dancing in a disco one night and he's performing on the stage. But there's something wrong, something unsaid that just pulls you in. It's just so, it brings the heart into plain focus. And there's a lot of quiet reflection, and their attempts to understand each other are just so poignant. Oh my God, it's just wonderful. But there are funny moments. So let's say that. And it is, treasure is a treasure.
Okay, that is a glowing review from you, Anne. So definitely people should go check that out. I have to tell you, the trailer for Tuesday, the tears.
Oh,
I had to call my daughter over.
oh
Because
no.
I'm like, you gotta suffer through this with me. Because if I'm bawling my eyes out, somebody else has to. And of course, she started crying. Julia Louis-Dreyfus looks so good in this. Please tell me that it's not just the trailer.
Oh, it's not just a trailer. It will drag you through the emotional mire. It's just, in a kind of weird, positive, negative way. Her daughter is terminally ill, and they find that this huge bird comes to take her to heaven, and he wraps his wings around her, and Julia fights him off and does everything in her power to stop him. And he goes away, and this repeats over and over again. So it's this constant battle to keep her daughter alive. And there's so much interesting things going on in it. The daughter has a collection of pontifical stuffed rats, which means they're wearing the Catholic vestments from the Vatican.
Yeah.
Just a very unusual family. So what she does, Julia decides to tell the birds stories. I don't know if you know Scheherazade, who kept herself alive back in early Asia by telling stories. So this is what she does. And I'm not going to tell you what happens. You'll have to find out, because I hope you and your daughter go to see it, and it's in theaters. It is a marvel.
People can't see me obviously but I'm sitting here with tears in my eyes. I am telling you, this movie, if you're a mother and you have daughters, I think this movie will be a must-see for mothers and daughters. It just looks extremely powerful.
Oh, and it's such a removal of a kind of role for Julia Louis-Dreyfus.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, let's talk about Power of the Dream. WBNA is having a moment, and this looks really good.
Another great film. I'm telling you, this is a good week. Yes, so it's a documentary on the WNBA, who's sort of risen to fame and political power since 2019. They're mostly Black. Their owner, Kelly Loeffler, would not allow them to promote Say Her Name or Black Lives Matter. So they rebelled. They were doing really well. They had the power to rebel. Every game, they wore a different T-shirt with the names of these people, with the names of Breonna Taylor, with the names of Reverend Warnock, the liberal who got in and replaced their owner, who was a conservative senator. Their power is beyond belief, and they did it against better judgment, I want to say. And they reign supreme. It's just so, and these girls are constantly making the news. Plus, they got themselves, wasn't Loeffler, they got themselves raises. The men were making $2 million. They were making 30,000. They got up there and they did it themselves. Honestly, your heart will burst watching this thing. And I'm not a sports fan. I was just so moved by it and so proud of these women.
Yeah, women are having such a great moment in sports right now with hockey and basketball.
Yeah.
I am here for it, frankly. That just fits right in with what she said. We all know that. So I'm looking forward to this one. So this is on Prime Video, Anne?
It is on Prime Video starting on the 18th.
Okay, fantastic. All right. So you've got all of these and a whole lot more. Very busy week for you, Anne. Going through the best and the worst for us. So I appreciate it. That's over on whatshesaidtalk.com, and we will see you next week. I don't think I can adequately express how excited I am to be joined by my next guest, Andrea Warner. Andrea is a celebrated music journalist and author of the new book, The Time of My Life, Dirty Dancing. Andrea's book offers an engaging exploration into the enduring popularity of dirty dancing, its lasting themes of feminism, activism, and reproductive rights, and one of my all-time favorite movies. So I am so excited to take a closer look at why this film has remained a cultural touchstone for over 30 years. Welcome to What She Said, Andrea.
Thank you, Candace. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so thrilled about this conversation. So let's start with the genesis of your book. What inspired you to write The Time of My Life, Dirty Dancing and explore this film in such depth?
Well, I have been obsessed with this movie since I saw it, I think when I was maybe like 9 years old. Like we had it, we had rented it. I was too young probably to see it, but that makes that extra impression. So it really penetrated my soul from a young age. And like before I understood its themes, I was just obsessed immediately. And then I can't even tell you how many times I've watched it since then. I was a fan of the pop classic series that ECW publishes, and I thought, okay, what could I write about with that kind of like sort of obsessive devotion, but also critical space, It was Dirty Dancing. Of course it was Dirty Dancing. I probably could have written books about other things too, but like Dirty Dancing is the all-time I think like favorite movie of that genre for me. And I had never fully appreciated how much it had informed my feminism until I really sort of dug into it. And I love writing about things that, kind of like subversively help us grow throughout our lives, especially when we're able to look back at it and understand why it is still so culturally significant 30 years later.
Yeah, it really is. And it is still so relevant, but not surprising, I think, for the time. It was initially rejected by producers and distributors everywhere. So Why do you think the film resonated so deeply with audiences once it was finally released?
Well, I think like there's a magical thing about this movie is that it is a story that's told from baby's perspective. And she is a 17 or 18-year-old girl who's about to go off to college. We're, I think, told often as women that our stories don't have a lot of value, don't have a lot of cultural impact. And this movie completely flips that script. Like baby is the perspective that we follow throughout the entire film. And I think that is really meaningful, perhaps for all of us who, when we see that for the first time, we think, oh, I might matter. My opinion about something matters. And then we see sort of baby grow in such a way that she, her sort of like theoretical feminism and activism is activated. Her sense of accountability, her sense of community and belonging, her ideas about privilege and all of these things that are really important. Plus, obviously, she learns to dance, and that's incredible. So, and we're seeing this story that we don't fully understand. I think usually most of us on first viewing, depending on where that first viewing was, that the entire sort of like nexus of the story is an abortion, an illegal abortion, and understanding why abortion is healthcare is at the heart of that film. So I get why people sort of initially rejected it for all the sort of classic reasons: sexism, fear of the abortion storyline, not wanting to just, do they want a silly romance about summer and dancing and a teenager losing her virginity. No, what they got is this like massively important cultural touchstone that carries through like not just 30 years, like we're at like 35 or 36 years. It's going to be 40 in a few. Like that's wild.
Yeah. And you mentioned, the film does touch on reproductive rights with the abortion subplot. So how was this aspect of the movie handled at the time, and what is its relevance, do you think, in today's political climate?
Well, Eleanor Bergstein, the screenwriter, and the associate producer of the film, she had been writing for a long time. She had lived through Roe v. Wade and getting reproductive rights enshrined in, or hoping that they would be enshrined in the Constitution, or at least by the Supreme Court in America. But she also understood that because, she'd been on both sides of that, where there were no reproductive rights and then suddenly there were, obviously through like decades of fighting for that, she knew that it could backslide. She understood implicitly that the right to something could be then taken away again by the very people that they had sort of defeated in order to get those rights. And she wanted people to be thinking about that. She wanted that to be sort of the subversive heart of Dirty Dancing. So she makes it the central point that if at any point someone said to her, like a studio executive or like an advertiser said, well, you got to take out the abortion subplot because that's like not okay. She was able to say, well, if we take that out, like the whole movie falls apart. Nothing can happen. And that is exactly what one of the advertisers tried to say to her. And she's like, well, if we take out the abortion, then there's no reason for Baby and Johnny to come together. There's no reason for anything in the movie to happen if we take away that subplot of Penny trying to obtain an illegal abortion. And I just I think that's like such a genius move. And it was such an intentional and specific move on Eleanor's part. And it has unfortunately come to, fruition again, almost 40 years later, where, we know Roe v. Wade was overturned. It was overturned while I was writing the book. It was very weird to be in that climate at that moment. And then to really be sort of talking about Dirty Dancing is an abortion movie.
Yeah, I know, right? And I don't think people understand that actually is what it's about. You also mentioned that Dirty Dancing isn't just a teen romance or a dance movie. So can you elaborate on the deeper social and political themes included in that movie outside of the abortion discussion?
Absolutely. So I think we're talking a lot about class in this movie as well. There's multiple social hierarchies at work because Baby and her family are the sort of upper class family who are going to this resort. There are the owners of the resort who sort of run everything, and they hire these different classes of workers who they treat very differently as well. There are these Ivy League waiters that are recruited to sort of entertain the daughters and sort of romance the daughters lightly, whereas the sort of quote unquote lower class workers who are the dancers and sort of these people who come from different socioeconomic backgrounds are considered just there to basically entertain, but should only be looked at, never engaged with. They should be sort of keeping themselves to themselves. And they are really considered the lowest class at the resort. So, there's a lot of sort of exploring what that means for both Baby and her family, and some of their hypocrisies, and for the workers and workers' rights and what they have access to. Johnny, some of his work ends up sort of being very much sort of related to sex work. So we've got that exploration happening. We also have the fact that Baby's family is a Jewish family. So there's, it isn't talked about a lot, but there is a cultural history there that is happening just 20 years after World War II. There's some background also happening that Baby is very called to activism and service. She wants to join the Peace Corps. She wants to fight for people's rights. The March for Civil Rights is happening around this time. The fight for civil rights for African Americans is happening at this moment, also sort of becoming a bit of a contextual background for the setting of the film. They talk about it a little bit here and there, but at the same time, there's the fact that there is basically the dancing styles and a lot of the music is being taken from Black and Latinx cultures and people and put onto and performed by white bodies. So there's so much else happening in Dirty Dancing that is quite complex and really deserves sort of like that deeper critical eye. Even as someone who like loves the movie and loves so much about it, I think there's a lot to explore there, in terms of sort of what is successful, what is a bit appropriative, and how we can reconcile those things as viewers later in our lives, and what we would, sort of what we have to acknowledge as fans of the film.
I am a huge fan of this book, and I just want to share how I approached it. I actually watched the movie again first. Then I read the book through. Then I went back and watched the movie again because I wanted to find what you were pointing out. And I felt like, for example, the appropriation of Black culture to me was something that I don't think many people in 1987 would have even considered or thought about. But I did notice it when I rewatched it again the first time before even reading the book. Just on a subconscious level, I thought, this is off.
Yeah.
And when you pointed it out, I thought, yes, that's exactly what's wrong here. So it's such a great book, Andrea. I really hope people who love the movie seek out your book. So I want them to also be able to connect with you, obviously. So where can they get the book and find you?
So you can get the book your favorite independent bookstore is always my first recommendation. You can also order it from the ECW website. You can link to it from it's linked on my site as well. It's theandreawarner.com, which is so embarrassing, but Andrea Warner was taken, so I had to go with the Andrea Warner. Anyway, and also at your library, if you don't have, I always recommend, like, if people don't have the means, because not all of us have the means to sort of buy books, and I totally respect that. And or asking your library to carry it for you is actually so helpful to authors as well. It's really meaningful. And also, there is a really wonderful person who did the audiobook, and that's available on Spotify.
All right. Fantastic. Andrea, thank you so much for joining me and for writing this book about one of my favorite movies. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Candace. I'm so happy you enjoyed it and that you watched it twice. Like, that's great.
Oh, believe me, I've watched it like many more times than that.
Oh, no, for sure.
Recently.
Like, have you ever attempted the lift?
Many times in our backyard pool. All right, Andrea, thanks so much. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Bill C-53, titled An Act Respecting the Recognition of Certain Métis Governments in Alberta, Ontario, and Saskatchewan, has sparked significant controversy. Critics argue that the bill fails to respect First Nations treaty rights and could lead to further infringement on their lands and resources without proper consultation. For a closer look at this issue, I'm joined by Dr. Pam Palmater, a Mi'kmaq citizen, practicing lawyer, and professor of Indigenous governance. With over 3 decades of experience in First Nation issues and social justice advocacy, Pam is here to discuss why Bill C-53 is problematic. Welcome back to the show, Pam.
Oh, thanks, my friend.
It's so great to see you. So could you start by explaining the main provisions of Bill C-53 and what it aims to achieve?
Right. So Bill C-53 is federal legislation that was introduced to recognize the Métis Nation of Ontario, Métis Nation of Saskatchewan, and Métis Nation of Alberta as governments in order to negotiate self-government agreements, negotiate a bigger treaty, and develop their own laws and jurisdiction, that kind of thing. The problem with it is that they didn't consult with any of the First Nation over whose territory that this is all supposed to take place. So this isn't about First Nations saying, oh, we don't like Métis. It's about, hey,
right.
Federal government, you need to consult with us.
Right. So that's the biggest concern then that's been raised, right? Is there anything else, or is primarily the biggest criticism?
It really is the biggest criticism. It shouldn't come as a shock to First Nations because keep in mind, the first peoples of this territory are First Nations and Inuit. Métis didn't form as a separate nation until well after settlement, right? Where they developed into their own historic community. Now, that's from the First Nation point of view. The Métis Nation or Red River Métis point of view is that the Métis Nation of Ontario isn't even Métis, that their citizens, a lot of them don't have any ancestry, and they certainly don't descend from the historic Red River Métis, which is what most Métis can think of when they're talking about Métis. So you now have the Manitoba Métis Federation, the government for the Red River Métis, saying, yeah, we're opposed to it too. They didn't consult with us. So you've got Métis, and I believe the Métis settlements also saying the same thing. And you've got First Nations saying, what are you doing? Creating new organizations that didn't exist. And what's interesting is that the Métis Nation of Saskatchewan has pulled out its support for this legislation, saying, oh, this isn't what we're about.
Correct me if I'm wrong then. Is it that we're sort of tiptoeing into the pretendian territory that you and I have talked about before?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. So you've got this situation where historic Métis, so Métis that developed as a government separately with their own language, their own culture, in their own specific area. You know, most people think of like Manitoba and the prairies, the Red River Métis. And the Supreme Court of Canada has recognized that the historic Métis Nation obviously has rights because they developed, their rights are protected in the Constitution. That's great. What started this all is a report that was done by the Métis Nation of Ontario, which found that a large number of their so-called citizens aren't Indigenous at all. And certainly those that do, many of them don't have ties to the actual historic Métis Nation. And the Supreme Court of Canada in the Powley case said specifically, it must be a historic connection to the historic nation, not a corporation or not a new community. So the Manitoba Métis Federation and First Nations are saying, Canada, you can't go around just creating new communities of Indigenous peoples that didn't exist before.
So where are we with Bill C-53 then? I think I read it was at the second reading. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we're thinking that the bill probably isn't going to go ahead, and certainly not before summertime anyway, which gives the government a bit of a reprieve because it really made a mistake here. I mean, governments for years now have been engaging with First Nations on lots of issues with regards to consulting on their rights. They didn't do that here. That was a huge mistake. It violated the Constitution, all of our treaty rights, and of course, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, where First Nations get to decide what's happening. So what people were saying is kill the bill. But it looks like the bill is going to die on its own. And I think that's the best outcome for that. Not to say we don't support the historic Métis Nation having self-government, but the government has to consult with any First Nations over territories where they'll be impacted.
So what should this look like then? In your mind, what would be the best path forward?
Well, I think the best path forward would be, first and foremost, if you even have any intention of recognizing the self-government of historic Métis, actual Métis communities, you need to talk to the First Nations in that territory. So if it's the Métis Nation of Saskatchewan, talk to all of the First Nations in that territory. If it's the Métis Nation of Alberta, the same thing. You get the idea. They need to sit down and talk and say, what are the issues where we could potentially be violating your rights, and how do we mitigate those issues? And where they have an opportunity to mitigate, great. And where they can't mitigate, that probably means they can't go forward. And that's what First Nations were saying all along. Why would you cut us out of this hugely important conversation? And so Canada will have an opportunity to get it right if they withdraw this one and do it again effectively and do it right. I mean, First Nations are entitled to free, prior, and informed consent, not after a done deal,
right,
but prior to it even being negotiated.
Yeah, it feels really like they really bungled this.
Big time, big time. I mean, governments bungle things all the time on Indigenous file, but this one, I would say I haven't seen as big of a mistake on their part, or I guess not non-consideration for a long, long time. This is really serious to have both the historic Métis Nation and First Nations opposing this bill, which is just unheard of.
Well, Pam, I can't thank you enough for joining me today. This came across my feed. I had not heard anything about it. So I feel like a lot of Canadians have not themselves heard much about it or understood it. So it's always important to get this, front and center with other people across the country so they know what's going on. So as always, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining me. I can't wait to have you back again soon.
Oh, I can't wait.
Coming out to your friends and family can be challenging, but coming out later in life after decades of marriage can be even more daunting. In this next interview, I'm joined by Jo DeLuzio, author of the powerful memoir, Surviving the Closet. Jo's book is an essential exploration of LGBTQ2S+ experiences, particularly focusing on those who come out later in life. With over 20 years of marriage before coming out, Jo's journey is both unique and inspiring. We're here to discuss her experiences, her book, and the broader implications of coming out later in life. Welcome to the show, Jo.
Thank you for having me.
What inspired you to write this book, and what do you hope readers will take away from it?
Well, I don't think anything inspired me to write the book. The book essentially wrote itself. I was literally sitting on the subway on my way to work one day, and it just popped into my head that I was a closet survivor. I hadn't heard that term before, and I took out my computer and I'm frantically keying, and I actually missed my subway stop. And I went along on my way, and I didn't look at what I had written for a few days. And when I looked at it, I broke down in tears, and I thought, I have to write this story. So the book kind of wrote itself. I guess it was inside of me and needed to come out. There was a lot more work than I realized that went into writing a book like this, but that's essentially how the book came to fruition. What do I hope to achieve? I think if even one person, but in particular one woman, can be inspired to take that step to come out of the closet, because there's so many of us that remain closeted for so many different reasons, then I think I will have accomplished something. So if I can do it, anyone can do it. If they can just find one ally, one person to tell and start on their journey, assuming they're safe, because not everyone is safe to come out of the closet.
Can you share with us maybe one or two of the key challenges you faced when deciding to come out after being married for over 20 years?
Sure. I didn't understand my sexuality till I was in my 30s. I really didn't have a good understanding of it. So by the time I recognized I was gay, I was married with 4 children. So there were many challenges. I think the first was telling my only husband, and I don't call him my ex-husband in the book because ex implies he's out of my life, and he's not. We're very close friends. He was at my wedding to my wife, and I was at his wedding to his wife. But the first was challenging to tell him, and he went through a very dark and difficult time. Support groups were difficult because I tried to go to a few support groups for people trying to come out of the closet. It was really super duper young people, and they were worried about how they're going to tell their parents. And I was worried about how I was going to tell my children. So I think the first hurdle was him. And well, actually the first hurdle was myself, coming out to myself and acknowledging who I was. And then the second hurdle was coming out to him. And the third was, to come out to our children. And it was a very long transition. We lived together in the same house for many years after he knew, because I couldn't walk out on 4 children. I'm not going to criticize anyone who makes that choice. And there was a lot of other factors. I was very worried about his mental health and some other stuff. So there were many, many, many challenges. And then I guess you find out who your friends really are, because I lost a lot of friends.
I'm sorry to hear that. And has that It was actually one of my questions is how did your friends and family react to this news?
Well, my family was amazing. Many of them were angry that I hadn't told them sooner. Why couldn't I have shared? So my family was amazing. My only husband's family, not so much. And I was sort of excommunicated from most of them, which was very painful and continues to be painful. I guess what happens in many times when any couple divorces or that, you have couples friends and they make a choice sometimes, and I lost. They chose him. I was the evil person that ruined a beautiful marriage that should have been forever. And he's a wonderful man. So I did lose a lot of friends. I've gained a lot of friends. I've gained a new family, my queer family. So it's not easy. It never is. But it is what it is. And you just have to keep moving forward. Take one step, move forward, take another step and move forward. And trying not to dwell on anything negative, but dwelling on the positive things and the wonderful things that are in my life now.
Can you discuss what the impact is of staying closeted? What is the impact on mental and physical health?
Well, I can't speak for, everyone. I can speak for myself and for people I knew. And I sent surveys out to a number of women who came out of the closet later in life. You don't feel very good about yourself. I think I literally wouldn't have survived the closet. You come to a point where you think maybe it would be better if I wasn't on the earth or whatever. It's a very deep and dark time. You don't feel good about yourself. You feel like you're an abomination. You feel like you're not worthy. So for me, coming out of the closet was life and death, even though nobody was going to kill me because of my sexual orientation. I don't know that I could have continued living that way. So I think people don't feel very good about themselves. They don't feel worthy. They feel lesser than.
Your book is really, it's being praised for its raw honesty and humor. So how important was it for you to balance those elements while telling your story?
Yeah, I wasn't trying to be rawly honest. I just told my story, and I'm thrilled that people understand it was authentic. And I also wasn't trying to be funny, but I guess it was just my natural personality that came out in the book. And it's been a little overwhelming, the response that people have had. I've had some pretty fabulous emails from people in their 80s, women in their 80s. One woman said I've inspired her to come out of the closet, and she's in her 80s. So,
oh wow,
overwhelming. Yeah, yeah. So I'm delighted if people found it honest and humorous.
We should be all encouraging people though to live their true, honest, authentic selves. And so I think you were at the top. We were talking about what effect could this book have on others, and I think you just mentioned one. It's fabulous.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I wasn't trying to be funny, but sometimes humor breaks the intensity of what you're saying.
How do you think the perception and acceptance of LGBTQ2S plus individuals coming out later in life has evolved, if at all? Do you think it's evolved?
I do think it has evolved. I think a lot of my publisher tells me there's a number of movie stars that have come out later in life, which has helped. I think it's becoming more common for people to come out later in life. I think all of the stories we have of people knowing they're gay when they were 6 years old and they always knew it are primarily men. And I think, yes, some women knew early, but I think for many of us, sexuality can be fluid. We may not understand. It's not always just one thing, if that makes sense. I think, generally speaking, we were coming through a time when to us LGBTQ plus people, generally whatever age they were coming out, were being accepted more. But I think we're in a difficult, turbulent time right now where we see a resurgence of homophobia, in particular transphobia. I think our rights are no longer safe, even in North America. So, but we're at a difficult time anyway. The world is in a humanitarian crisis. So there's a resurgence of anti-Semitism, of Islamophobia, and so on. So, you just think you take 3 steps forward, and now we're moving 2 steps back. But I think there's a little bit of struggle within the queer community as well. Initially, you're met with some women with a little bit of skepticism, oh, you must be bisexual. And there is a lot of biphobia in the gay and straight communities. But I think it's been a journey. I've had lots of lows, but I've had many, many highs. And the queer community, many people in that community have become like a family to me. So
I want people to be able to find your book. And are there places that they can connect with you online if maybe they have questions or they want to follow along?
Sure. They can email me at jo.deluzio@gmail.com. They can connect with my publisher, Ray Books Publishing. The book is available on Amazon and pretty much any place that you can order books from. I would also like to plug my next book, which is coming out soon, and it's called Just Gone. And I interviewed people who came to Toronto as refugees because of their 2S LGBTQ plus status. So people that were being raped and tortured and horrible things happening. And the stories are horrific. But people need to know that this is going on in other countries in the world. And the people that I interviewed are incredibly brave and they want their stories told. So that book is, I think now might be available for pre-order, but I think it's a really important book. But yes, they can contact me or the publisher or order the book. That would be peachy keen.
All right. Fantastic. Jo, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your story with us.
You're welcome. And thank you for having me.
If today's podcast resonated with you, spread the word and share the inspiration. Don't forget to hit subscribe on What She Said across your favorite podcast platforms. Crave more? Join my vibrant community by signing up for my newsletter at whatshesaidtalk.com, and let's get social on Facebook, Instagram, and X at What She Said Talk. Dive into my world a little deeper on TikTok and Threads at Candace Said. And for those who love the airwaves, catch me weekly on 105.9 The Region, Blast the Radio, and 107.7 Pulse FM. Until next time, keep making waves and remember, your voice matters.
Come on a journey like no other, where you will discover many roads that will lead you to a happier, healthier, and more stress-free life. And the beauty is, you don't need any vacation time for this adventure. The journey will come to you. Join Avery Rich on your very own journey into yoga. Along the way, she will demystify yoga poses and guide you into a yoga posture or short sequence, all in less than 15 minutes. You have nothing to lose but stress. The Journey into Yoga podcast. It's not for people who like yoga, it's for people who don't like yoga. Follow or subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or at averyrich.com.
I'm Andrea Askowitz.
And I'm Allison Langer. And we are the hosts of Writing Class Radio, a podcast, but we are so much more. We have writing classes. So if you are looking for live online classes where you can join a community, write to a prompt, get feedback, and get better, check out all our classes at writingclassradio.com.
And listen to our podcast wherever you get your podcasts and at writingclassradio.com.
Another Sound Off Media Company podcast.